All right. Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone to coming out tonight. Thanks for taking time out of your evening to talk about real estate. So I spent a lot of time on this, really going through kind of what I think would be the most beneficial things to learn in 30 to 40 minutes. And then we're going to have a question and answer at the end. But just as the topic starts, we'll go in and kind of get into it. So it's titled How to Start Investing in Real Estate. Oftentimes people think, well, do I need to have a lot of money to invest? What types of property should I invest in? How much money do I need? What makes a good investment? And we're going to go through all of those today. So hopefully you'll have a lot of your questions answered and maybe your eyes open up to some new methods in real estate investing. I'm Howard Thurston. I'm the principal broker and owner of Utah Valley Realty. So the first question is, why invest in real estate? So I really narrowed it down to about 6 different subtopics of why it's important or why it's a good idea to invest in real estate. So if you think about it, I'd say about 90% of the millionaires in the world have some type of investment in real estate. So that kind of goes to show that, hey, if these guys are doing it, it's probably a good idea to invest in real estate because that's where a lot of millionaires are found. And real estate's one of the best ways to catapult people into millionaire status. We're also going to talk about appreciation. So what is appreciation? What does that mean when it comes to real estate? We're going to talk about depreciation, so where things go down in value. We're going to talk about principal pay down. So if you take a loan out on a property, whether it's a commercial property or a residential property, when you make a payment, you're going to be paying part of your principal every month, which is going to lower the total mortgage balance. We're also going to talk about potential tax benefits. We're going to talk about leveraging your money. So the beauty of real estate is that you don't need to have all cash to buy properties. You can actually have a lot of it leveraged by banks, by investors, by business partners. And number 6 is you can borrow against it. I mean, what a cool asset that you have to be able to say, hey, I still want to keep the asset. I still want the benefits of real estate, but I want to be able to borrow against it to then maybe invest in more real estate or invest in a business or pay off some high debts and stuff. So those are kind of 6 subtopics that we're going to talk about why to invest in real estate. Number 1 is appreciation. So with real estate, there's a book way back in the day that was called Beat Inflation with Real Estate. And that's the beauty of real estate, is that if you buy something today, over time, it generally goes up in value. It goes up in value. It tends to beat inflation. So we're going to kind of talk about the Utah County real estate marketplace in Utah, but this can be applied to any market all across the world. So for example, let's say you go and buy a house this year for $300,000. Well, there's typically a good idea that it'll probably go up in value the next year by maybe 3-4%. Obviously, some markets are really crazy. Some aren't as crazy. But let's say it goes up by 3%. So now you've got that real estate asset that you bought for $300,000. Now it's worth $309,000 because it went up 3%. And the cool thing about it is that you didn't have to do anything to that property. It just went up in value by itself. That's an extra $9,000 of net worth to you for just owning a piece of real estate. Now, imagine you had 10 pieces of real estate and they're all $300,000 and they go up by 3%. You know, that's $90,000 in appreciation, and all you did was own that piece of real estate. So that's the wonderful thing about appreciation. Utah is a high growth state. We have a high growth population, a lot of other companies and people are relocating from other states to come to Utah because it is a great place for employment. It's low unemployment right now. And it's just a great place for businesses to recruit high quality employees. The other thing too, that's kind of interesting. So I was looking at some stats. So August of 2020, for single family homes, the median sale price for a house was $412,000. So August 2020, the median sale price for a single family house in Utah County was $412,000. Well, guess what? 1 year ago, August 2019, that same house was $370,000. So in 1 year's time, the house went from $370,000 to $412,000. That is a $42,000 appreciation in 1 year by simply owning that piece of real estate. Now that blows my mind because if you look at America and you think about what's the average income that a person makes, maybe it's $56,000 or something around there. You're almost creating a second job for yourself without ever having to go into work, just by owning that piece of real estate. The other thing we want to talk about depreciation. Now, this is a really cool topic. I could create a whole nother webinar on just depreciation itself. But for IRS purposes and for tax purposes, they say, hey, that piece of real estate will eventually get older and it's not going to be worth anything anymore. It's kind of like a car. They figure, hey, if the car you buy is worth $40,000, well, by 10 years from now, that car is going to be worth $2,000. It just goes down in value. And that's what the IRS is applying for real estate, is they're saying that, hey, real estate gets old. It's not going to be worth as much. It's going to be grody. People are going to want something new. So the cool thing about it is that for residential properties, the IRS lets you take the building value, not the land value, so the building value. And a lot of times you can find that from your tax county assessor for like residential properties, and assess what the building value is and talk to your CPA and attorney about this as well. And then you could take, for residential, it's 27 and a half years, take the building value, divide it by 27 and a half years. And that gives you that annual amount that you can use for depreciation and to then possibly offset your taxes against your adjusted gross income to, in a sense, potentially lower your taxable income, which is crazy because the property is actually going up in value, but the government's allowing for you to depreciate it, saying it's worth less, which means you're actually paying less in taxes. That's called the straight line depreciation method. To get more complex, there are other different types of depreciation methods for real estate. One of which is the it's like the accelerated depreciation method. So like the cost-based approach depreciation, it gets kind of intricate and pretty intense. But basically, you can use that as a tax shelter to help lower your adjusted gross income. For commercial, commercial properties, it is 39 years for that as far as depreciation goes. Let's talk about principal paydown. So the beauty of principal paydown is that if you do get a loan, the bank is going to loan you a lot of money for how little you're putting into a property. So I'll give you an example. So I just bought a property 3 weeks ago, and I bought it, and it's a long story short, I only put $3,000 down into the property. Now, let's say it goes up, let's say I hold on to it for 2 years, and it goes up 3% every year. I bought it for $400,000. So it goes up 3%. So it goes up 12,000, let's say another 12,000. So by the end of 2 years, let's say it goes up $24,000. I only put a $3,000 investment into the property. Let's say I sold it, assuming it was just, hypothetical clean sale, no fees and whatnot, 24,000 off of my $3,000 investment. That is, 500, 600% ROI on my money, because I put maybe 2%, 1% down on this investment, and the bank is loaning me that much more money to help me get into this property. And every monthly payment I make right now is paying down my principal, which is awesome. And the cool thing about rental properties is that if you buy a rental property, your tenants are funding your retirement for you. So I tell my wife, I say, hey, we're moving a lot because I want to buy these rental properties, and you can buy a property every year as a primary residence, live there for 1 year, turn around, turn it to a rental, go buy another property as a primary residence, and you can kind of ladder step this a couple times, and now you've built up this rental portfolio with a lower interest rate, with less money down, and the tenants are now funding your retirement. I tell my wife, I say, hey, I want to own real estate, but I don't want to pay for it. And that's the beauty of borrowing money from a bank or whoever, is that you're buying the house for 30 years, you're only paying for that first year, and then you stick tenants in there in the next 29 years, those tenants are paying your mortgage for you. You're potentially making cash flow, you're getting depreciation, it's going up in value, and they're paying off your loan for you. So in 30 years from now, or let's say you do a 15-year loan, that thing is totally paid off. They just funded your retirement for you. Now at the end of that, you're getting this massive cash flow. And talk to your CPA and attorney. I can't give you that kind of advice, but it could potentially be lower taxes for you because now it's considered long-term capital gains income, which is great because it's like, wow, this is incredible. Someone's giving me money. They're buying the asset for me. I'm set for retirement. So if you can do that a couple times, rough it a couple times, and buy a property, live in it for a year, move out, buy another property, live in it for a year, move out, and build up your rental portfolio that way, you can do it for less money down. You can do it in a shorter time frame, and you've got retirement set up for you. So if you're not good with spending and you're kind of bad at money management, that might be a strategy for you to jump into. The other thing is tax benefits. So this is incredible. So a lot of people buy real estate actually to help shield against taxes. I talked to a big real estate investor here in Utah County several years ago, and he said, Howard, I want to pay less in taxes. I said, oh yeah, how are you going to do that? He's like, I'm going to go buy more real estate. And I kind of laughed and I thought, that is so silly. Like, why would you go buy more real estate to pay less in taxes? But he knew the benefit, because when you buy real estate, there's potentially tax benefits. Some of which is, if you buy a house as a primary residence, then when you go and you live in it, a lot of times the interest that you pay could be tax deductible. Now, check the IRS website, check with your CPA, but that also lowers your adjusted gross income because you get to write off the interest. If you buy a property and you live in it 2 of the last 5 years, when you go to sell it, the profit you make could be tax-free. Once again, talk to your CPA or attorney. I can't give you advice. I'm just sharing my experience. I'm sharing my knowledge of seeing other people. And so that profit you make could be tax-free. One of the things that we did growing up, so my dad was a home builder and he also owned a real estate company. And so he'd buy a vacant piece of land. He'd build a really nice custom house and he'd build it at cost because he's the builder. We would live there for 2 years. After the end of the 2 years, he'd turn around and sell it. He'd make $150,000, let's say $200,000 profit. And guess what? No taxes, didn't pay any taxes on it. To me, it's one of the biggest loopholes out there. It's one of the biggest benefits that the IRS is giving homeowners. So once again, you live in a house 2 of the last 5 years and you sell it, and the profit you make could potentially be tax-free. So, which is incredible. I mean, if you make $100,000 doing that every 2 years, that's $50,000 a year. You know, if you're paying taxes on that, you're probably equivalent to working a $75,000 a year job just to net $50,000. And guess what? You didn't go to work for that. You basically just owned real estate and it just grew for you. So that's one of the cool tax benefits with that. Another cool tax benefit is, let's say you bought a rental property and you go to sell it. Well, if you take the income from the profits from that sale, then you could potentially pay taxes on it. Now, there's a really cool term called a Tax 31 deferred exchange. Now, once again, talk to CPA, talk to your attorney about that. But a lot of it is saying that, hey, if you buy a piece of rental property and it goes up in value and you sell it, that profit you make, yes, the Uncle Sam does want a part of that. They want to tax you on that. But the 1031 is cool because you can basically take that profit that you made and say, hey, IRS, we're not going to give you the money right now. We're going to defer that for a later date. We'll pay you down the road. And you can then take that money, then reinvest it into another like-for-like type of rental property, and you can start building up your rental portfolio without having to pay taxes on the profit or the sale of that property. And that's going to jumpstart your real estate career real fast as far as investing goes. And the beauty of it is that you could do that until you die. Say, hey, IRS, I'll pay you later. I'll pay you later. Hey, I'm going to do 1031. Don't worry about it. And you just keep doing that. And guess what? Now you're taking that property that you would have been taxed on from the profit. Now you're keeping that from taxes and you're basically putting it into bigger and better properties. So really cool strategy that you can do with that. And there's a lot of other intricate details that we can get into as well on that. The other thing is leveraging your money. So this is a really cool, interesting fact. So banks will loan you money to buy homes, which is, I think, is awesome. Now, the interesting thing, like if you go to Chase Bank, now Chase Bank's got mortgage professionals. They can loan you money to basically go and buy a house. Now, what they won't do is they're not going to loan you. Let's say you go buy a house and you put 5% down. They're going to loan you 95% loan to value of the house. Now, Chase will not loan you money to buy their own stock, which is crazy. All these banks are like, hey, we'll loan you hundreds of thousands of dollars to go buy real estate, but we're not even going to loan you $1,000 to put money in our own stock. That's how much banks believe in the power of real estate. And that's why I'm like, man, we need to leverage real estate. Right now, especially in the market, interest rates are extremely low. I saw a post today on Facebook. Someone posted and they said that, hey, 2 years ago, interest rates were this. They're now this. Purchase price was $350 back then at the higher interest rate. Purchase price now is $400 because it's gone up in value, but once again, lower interest rate. And they looked at it apples to apples, and the payments, monthly payments, were the same with a $400,000 house versus a $350,000 house, just because the interest rate was so much lower, which it is today. Plus, the cool thing about that, yeah, I know prices have gone up, but here's the other kicker. Your monthly payment is still going to be affordable, pretty good. The other thing too is that every payment you make, you're paying a ton of principal down now compared to getting an interest rate that was much higher. So that's another beautiful thing to be able to get into real estate, because interest rates are low. And you can get into real estate. I mean, you can literally get into real estate with no money down. And that's the cool thing, is you can buy a $300,000 house, no money down. You can go do, Utah housing loan, rural housing loan. Sometimes there's government grants for no money down. If you're an investor, you can get a little creative and maybe work out a seller financing strategy. But really, I mean, you can buy a $200,000 item with no money down, and then it goes up in value. You get all these tax benefits potentially, and then you go and flip it and you make a lot of money in the end, and you could potentially make it tax-free by moving it around and such. Just blows my mind. There's not many investment vehicles that I can think of where you can put so little and borrow so much. I mean, yeah, for your stock people out there, you can say, well, you can buy on margin, I can buy options. Well, that's great, but at the end of it, if your stock doesn't go up or go down, whatever strategy you're using, that option money is gone. With real estate, it's different. That money's still in the house, and it's going up in value. Just historically speaking, real estate just goes up in value. So another thing to think about as far as leveraging your money. Another cool thing, I want to share an example. So I just helped a friend of mine buy a house up in North Salt Lake. And we found out that it was an accessory dwelling unit, had a legal accessory apartment, and which means that he can live in part of the house and rent out the other house to help cover his mortgage payment. We call that house hacking. And so what he did is we contacted the city, we talked to the building official, talked to the zoning department, make sure that, hey, legally, can we rent this out? And they said, yep, you're totally good as long as you meet these requirements, which we did. We said, cool. We posted it online. We got tons of applicants for it. And my buddy texted me the other day and said, hey, Howard, you're not going to believe this, but I got all my mortgage covered by the tenants upstairs. And I'm like, no way, that's crazy to think about, because here he is, bought this property. He's living in it for free because someone else is paying his mortgage. They're paying his principal, his loan down by paying tons of principal, and it's going to go up in value. It's just a really cool thing. And he's getting some of the potential tax benefits, like the interest write-off, stuff like that, to help propel his growth and grow his net worth, which is just incredible to me. So you can also house hack. You can buy duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, all kinds of really cool properties to help house hacker give you money to help pay down your mortgage for you. So the other thing, the last thing is you can borrow against it. I mean, that's crazy, where you can say, hey, I own this property and I need money. I'll give you an example. So about 7 or 8 years ago, I was doing a big fix and flip. And when I was doing this fix and flip, I needed to borrow money. I needed to borrow like $500,000 cash. So we call it hard money or private money. So what I did is me and my business partner talked to this guy who had $1 million house, had it paid off. And we said, hey, we need to borrow money. The going rate right now is like 12% interest to borrow money. So he said, yeah, sure, I'll loan you $500,000. Went to the bank, did a home equity line of credit, pulled $500,000 at 4 or 5%, turned around, lent it to us for 12%, plus he charges points up front. So I think at that time he charges 2 points up front. So 1 point is 1% of the loan amount. So the guy made $10,000 up front, plus he made the difference between the 4 or 5% he borrowed for the HELOC, and he charges 12. So for him, it was awesome. And he collateralized it to real estate. So if things went sour on our part, he's now got this property he can flip, make money too. So he's just in this win-win situation. And guess what? He didn't have to have the money in the bank. He didn't have to liquefy any stocks. He didn't have to tap into a 401k. He just literally just tapped into his house, said, hey, I need to borrow money against my house, which is pretty cool. Now, if you own stocks or stuff like that, sometimes you can borrow, sometimes you can't borrow against it. But I just think real estate's just super cool. And there's 3 ways you can actually borrow money from your house without having to sell it. Number 1 is doing a home equity line of credit. So talking to your bank, it's kind of like saying, hey, I'm just going to take a personal loan against my house. And interest rates are generally pretty low. And then they can term that, say, hey, we'll do a 5-year term or a 10-year term, whatever, to be able to pay that back. And then you can use that to pay off like high credit card debt, invest it in a business, remodel your house to improve its value, or use it to give to other people to then make money off of and stuff like that. The number 2 method to be able to borrow against your house is you can do a cash out refinance. So if you've got enough equity in your house, you go to the bank and say, hey, bank, my house is worth this. I owe this. I want to refinance at this. So that difference between the higher refinance you're going to do compared to the current loan balance you're at is the cash they'll give you. And so you still own the house. You potentially still get all those tax benefits. You just get to take that money, and then the interest rate, whatever it is at the going rate, whatever they quote you, you're still going to get a good idea, and you're going to get that money to be able to reinvest, which is just totally awesome. The third way, and once again, talk to an attorney or a CPA about this, is you could potentially ask an investor and say, hey, I need to borrow money against my house. How about you loan me $20,000? We'll create a note. I'll put you in second position on my house behind my first lien holder, which is the actual mortgage servicer I work with. And then I'll pay you off in 2 or 3 years or whatever. And then the note will get released and stuff like that. So once again, don't have to sell your house. Those are the 3 simple ways you can do to be able to borrow against it. Overall, real estate's just an incredible asset. Everyone needs a place to live. Not everyone needs stocks. Not everyone needs a 401k. Not everyone needs an IRA. I don't hear anybody, screaming and saying, oh my gosh, I'm a multi-millionaire because my 401k just rocked it. Or my IRA just crushed it this year. Like I'm got tons of money, just awesome. I don't hear that, but I do hear real estate or people are like, oh my gosh, I bought this property 5 years ago and it just doubled in value. I got $150,000 off my house. And I'm like, that's crazy. And you're not even paying for it. You got some tenant in there paying your mortgage for you. So incredible. Let's jump into a different segment. We're going to talk about how much money do you need. So this gets a little bit interesting because it kind of varies. So it depends. So if you were to go to a traditional bank today and say, hey, I want to go buy this rental property. I'm not going to live in it. I want to rent it out. They're typically going to ask that you come up with 20 to 25% down payment. Now, there are some local banks out there. There's one here called Mountain America Credit Union. They used to do a 10% down, no mortgage insurance investment loan. But because of COVID and everything that's happening, they're saying, hey, we don't feel comfortable with that low risk. We're going to get rid of that loan program and go back to 20. So generally, you're going to see 20 to 25% down on rental properties. And you're going to get a higher interest rate than if you were to buy it as a primary residence, because if things get bad, you lose your job, you're probably going to make payments on the house you're living in because you're living there versus your rental property. You're going to be like, I'm not living there. Forget that. I'm not going to make that mortgage payment. I'm going to make the one I'm living in now. So banks take that into consideration. They say, hey, we're going to charge you a higher interest rate. We want more money down because it's more risk. And you don't really need a second house, but they'll let you do it anyways, which is pretty nice on their part. So the other cool thing with as far as financing properties, so that's the traditional method of being able to buy properties. There are lots of other methods to be able to buy properties. You could do lease option to purchase. So basically you can go to a homeowner and say, hey, listen, I want to buy your property, but I don't have the money right now or I can't qualify. So you can say, hey, with the lease option, I'll give you $5,000 option money right now. And I want the right to buy your property at X price for the next 2 years. So basically you've locked in the price right now and you've got 2 years to decide on it. And you could either live there or you could rent it out, whatever you want to do. And then if you decide to exercise that option to say, I do want to purchase at that price, because let's say the market goes up a ton. Well, the cool thing about it is that you can use that $5,000 as part of your down payment or whatever you want to do with it. Now you can buy the property at a low price because you've got it locked in versus where the market's at right now. Now you can make money and flip it. Or if the market, let's say, goes south and you're just not unsure, you're just like, I don't know, I'm just going to go rent. Wait, maybe think of a different method instead of just renting. Let's do a lease option. Maybe you can convince the seller to say, hey, I'll do $2,000 or $2,500 in option money. And let's say 2 years from now, the market goes down 10%. Well, guess what? Forget it. Lose the $2,500 or $2,000, because that's much better than losing $20,000 or $25,000. And I've seen it happen, back in the 2008 crash. But generally, real estate's going to go up in the long run. So playing the short game, it's a little bit harder to predict, but long run, I do feel confident based on historical data that it's probably going to keep going up. And right now, interest rates are so low that it's like a no-brainer. Like you buy it right now, throw someone else in it, they're going to make payments for you. You get some potential tax benefits, and they're paying down your principal. It's just like beautiful to me. I'm like, I can't convince my neighbor, hey, go buy me stocks right now, and then I'll pay you back later. You can't do that, but with real estate, you can. It's just pretty interesting. So once again, talked about COVID. So a lot of mortgage companies right now have tightened up guidelines. They're saying, hey, you know what? Like if you're an FHA buyer, generally we could do a 580, FICO score with only 3.5% down, but they're like, well, we want to make sure we bump that up to like 640 or 660 or 680 minimum FICO before we even consider giving you a loan. But those change. Loan programs change all the time. You look back in like 2007, and what happened was people couldn't afford these houses. And so what did the banks do? They said, hey, you know what? Let's create a loan program called adjustable rate mortgage. And so we're going to say, hey, you know what? We know you can't qualify for a typical 30-year mortgage. What we'll do is we're just going to do like a 7-1 ARM, and we're going to let you pay just interest only for the next 7 years with a little teaser rate where the interest rate might jump up a little bit. And then that way it was affordable for them to get in the house. Big problem about that obviously was people were buying houses they could never even qualify for in the first place. This market's totally different. People are qualified, generally speaking. I mean, you go try to get a loan in a bank, it's like pulling teeth. You're like, what? You need all these documents? That's crazy. I'm not going to do that. So just kind of something to think about and consider. The cool thing too is if you don't have money to buy real estate, you can partner with people. You can say, hey, let's go ahead and let's partner. You put up some money, or I'll put up the money, or let's split the money half, and we'll go half seas on this property and go buy it. The beauty of the MACU loan, which isn't working, it wasn't in effect right now, but like if you buy rental property, it's 20% down. Well, if you did the MACU loan program, it's like you could buy 2 properties for the price of 1. So 20%, now you're doing 10-10. And guess what? No mortgage insurance, and you get to buy 2 properties. Now you get to use that for depreciation or whatever, kind of tax strategies you're looking for. So look out for that. There are some, local banks that do offer some, competitive financing in terms and such. So here's a quick, simple example. You buy a house for $30,000 or $300,000. You're going to typically put 20% down. You're going to finance that $240,000. And then after that, $240,000, that's going to kind of make up your monthly payment, stuff like that. And there's a lot of things involved in your monthly payment. You've got principal, interest, property taxes, homeowners insurance. Maybe there's a homeowners association you got to start paying for. If you don't put 20% down on a primary residence and you're looking at paying mortgage insurance, all kinds of things that factor in your monthly payment. So let's talk about some types of real estate to invest in. So there's lots of different classifications and classes to invest in, one of which is multi-unit. So for residential, to go to a bank and get a residential loan where you can actually live in it and rent out the other units, it goes up to 4 units. So once you get to 5 units or more, the bank's going to say, that's not a residential loan anymore. That's commercial. And then it's a whole different ball game from that point. But just know that, hey, you could buy a fourplex and you can rent out the other 3 units and live in one and go and buy that property, which I think is a really cool idea, because the more units you own, to me, it's almost the less risk you're taking, because if one of those units isn't filled or is vacant, it's okay because you got 2 other people making payments for you. So you're kind of okay. If you owned a single family house and the monthly payment was $1,600 and that tenant doesn't make payments that month, guess what? You're covering the whole $1,600, which could be a lot versus a fourplex where it's like, oh, they didn't pay $100. It's okay because it's only going to cost me $600 because I've got 2 other renters paying the other part of the mortgage. Now, one thing you have to think about too, so you can do a duplex, triplex, or a fourplex. Now, a duplex financing is almost going to be typically the same as a single family residence. Like 5% down, stuff like that for conventional. Once you get to 3 units or 4, the ball game kind of changes a little bit. You want to talk to your mortgage professional. You might be required to put more money down. They might appraise it differently to make it a little bit more difficult to get into as far as a multi-unit. But just know that if you're going to buy this in House Hack, multi-unit is a great option, duplex, triplex, or a fourplex. Another thing, another kind of property is a legal accessory apartment. Now, they're kind of interesting. So a legal accessory apartment can look like a duplex. It's got 1 unit, the other unit, you live in one, you rent out the other, you're totally fine. The difference between a legal accessory apartment and a duplex is zoning. So you got to talk to zoning and figure out what the rules are. So from my experience with certain cities is that if you buy a property that has a legal accessory apartment or like a rental dwelling in it, when you move out, you can't put another tenant in there and rent out both units. That is not allowed for legal accessory apartment. That is allowed for a duplex, but for an accessory apartment, you got to double check with the city or the zoning department. That's why duplexes are a little bit more valuable and they tend to cost a little bit more. It's because of that exact reason. So if you were to say, hey, I'm going to live in it, have someone make my payments for me. Well, if you move out, sorry, you can only rent out 1 unit and have the other one empty. So total bummer as far as that goes. But this is a great opportunity to house hack, because you're like, hey, I really want to buy in this neighborhood and I'm going to go up in my price. I'm going to buy a $500,000 property. Well, guess what? If you have a legal accessory apartment, maybe you can rent out that basement for $1,000. And let's say your mortgage payment is $2,400 a month. Well, now you're only paying $1,400 a month to live in a nice house in a nice neighborhood because the tenant downstairs is paying that for you. The other thing too, single family homes are like a mother-in-law. So single family house could be a condo, townhome, single family house, doesn't matter. You can live there. If you're, solo person or whatnot, you could potentially rent out the bedrooms to help offset that. Once again, another house hack strategy. If you have a house and let's say you've got a kitchen in that house, it doesn't always mean that you can rent out that space just because you got a kitchen down there. So the city and the zoning department will say, wait a second, this is zoned as a single family house. This is not zoned as an accessory dwelling unit or a legal accessory apartment. We're not going to allow for you to do that because number one is what you didn't approve it through zoning. Number two is it could tick off a lot of the neighbors. They could say, wait a second, like this guy's got like 8 people living at the house. Like he's got cars parked out on the street. It's bringing our value down because it's making him money, but it's making us look bad because the neighborhood's not as well kept. So you got to double check with that, because literally a mother-in-law, duplex, legal accessory apartment can all kind of look the same, but you got to really talk to the city to figure out what the classification is on that. The other thing with single family houses is just because let's say you have a house that has 8 bedrooms does not always mean that you can say, hey, I'm going to rent out all 8 bedrooms. Like I'm going to make tons of money. Like you got to check with zoning, because sometimes zoning will say, well, this section right here in this city is mapped out as an R16, which is, and our rules are saying that, hey, you can only rent out to 3 non-blood related or 1 family. Now, if that family has 20 kids, great. You could probably rent it per the, city rules, zoning rules, stuff like that. But doesn't mean you can throw 20 different people in there and charge, $400 a pop. Like you got to be careful with that. I always try to abide by the rules and be honest and say, let's do this right. I don't ever want to get in a situation where I'm doing things illegal and then the city or departments come after me and say, hey, we're going to slap a fine on you, or we're going to really put you on our blacklist and look out for you. The other thing is townhomes. So the beauty of townhomes is that you really don't have to take care of the exterior, like the landscaping. You don't have to mow the yard typically. They're great rental properties, just because they're easy to maintain. I think for a first-time home buyer, I think townhomes are a pretty good option, just because you can just live in the house, make it cute, not really worry about the yard or worry about, replacing the roof or, fixing the exterior, painting, stuff like that. Now, the caveat with townhomes is that generally you do have an HOA because you do have shared common walls. And if you have shared common walls, a lot of times there's an HOA created to say, hey, we need money from everyone each month to help pay for the insurance for all the exterior of the buildings and so on and so forth. Townhomes are great. So because, I think a lot of people now are kind of shifting towards, hey, we like the community feel. We don't want to rent a house where we've got this massive yard we got to take care of. And and townhomes generally for the same price, you can generally get a little bit of a newer townhouse than you can for a single family home that has maybe more deferred maintenance. So just kind of something to think about. If you're trying to buy this as an investment, turn it to a rental, townhomes could be a good option just because they're a little bit less hands-off as far as the yard and stuff like that. Condos. Now, condos are kind of a different animal. So the reason I say that, why they're different than townhomes. So condos are horizontal space. Townhomes are vertical space. So with condos, you own the airspace inside the unit. The exterior, once again, usually taken care of by the HOA. Now, with condos, if you go and buy a condo in a condo complex, and if you get financing, a lot of times the bank will say, hey, well, if you're going to buy this condo, we need to pull what's called the condominium certificate. We need to take a look at this whole complex and see how many of these are rented and how many of these are actually lived in and owned by the actual owners themselves. Now, if there's a lot of rental units in that condo complex, then the bank might say, hey, whoa, we don't want to invest in this neighborhood because we don't understand the valuation there, because now it's all rental, so we don't know what the real value is as far as home prices and stuff like that. And so oftentimes the bank will say, no, even though you're qualified for $1 million, sorry, Joe, we're not going to loan you money to buy this condo because there's too many rentals than there are owner-occupied properties. So kind of an interesting ballgame. There are some lenders that will say, hey, we don't care if it's a non-warrantable area. We will still go ahead and give you a loan for that. But do know that there are some banks that totally pull back and say, no, we're not going to do condos. Condos could be a good little rental property. They're generally cheaper, less expensive than like townhomes, or definitely less than single family homes. And, you can generally get something a little bit newer and nicer. So mobile manufactured homes. So be careful with these. So if you were to buy like a mobile or manufactured homes, a lot of banks will not offer financing because they'll say, wait a second, that to me is kind of like a car. You can move it. It's not on a permanent structure. And because of that, we're going to not give you money for it. We kind of consider it like a car, or we'll do a bill of sale. There are few banks out there that specialize in mobile manufactured homes. So, and oftentimes the length of the loan isn't like your typical 30 years. Sometimes it's like a 15 or 20, because the banks look at this as, hey, this house isn't really set up and as strong as a normal house because like there's no foundation or stem walls or footings and stuff like that in a mobile or manufactured home like you would with a single family home. The other thing too is I've noticed with a lot of mobile homes, so just because you own a mobile home, if you do get one, a lot of the rules will say, hey, we don't want any renters in this neighborhood or no dogs, stuff like that, just to protect from liability and getting sued and stuff like that. So think about that. If you decide to invest in mobile homes or manufactured homes, there are rules and things you want to look out at. Land. Now, land is interesting. So land, you don't generally make money off land until you sell it. That's the one asset where it's kind of like you buy it and you kind of forget about it and just wait for it to go up in value and just grow in value. The great thing about real estate is that they're not growing any more of it. Land doesn't just grow itself. Maybe the grass and the weeds on top of it, but not land itself. So land is limited. Land is scarce. There's always going to be a demand for land. Home builders are always trying to find new land to purchase to build new homes. So land could be a great resource for you if you want to invest in land. I would tend to be a little bit careful if you're saying, hey, I just want to buy this, cool 2-acre lot out in the, in the boonies in this neighborhood. Like, be careful, because if you ever get in a situation where it's like, hey, I need that money, you might be sitting on it for a while before someone else buys it, because they're just like, it's just so remote. Like, why would I buy that piece of land? I can't use it for anything, unless I build a cabin and live there. So think about that with land. There are some other rules with land too, like greenbelt taxes, where you're saying, hey, instead of paying your normal property taxes, I want to turn this into a greenbelt area. And now I want to grow crops on it and make an X amount of money so that I can qualify for greenbelt status, not have to pay as much in taxes. Just kind of something to think about with that. Now, commercial is kind of a whole different ballgame. So with commercial, a lot of the banks, when they value commercial properties, they don't just say, hey, what's the comparables are? What are the comparables for commercial properties? Like, they don't just say, oh, well, that building looks kind of like this one, so that one sold for $1 million, so this one's got to be worth, $1 million as well. They don't generally look at that. So commercial buildings is a little different. In fact, some people like commercial because they say, hey, Howard, it's actually easier to qualify for a loan with commercial than it is for residential, which I know you're probably mind blown. Like, what? How is commercial, easier to qualify for sometimes? So with commercial, a lot of times the banks will loan you money based on how much income that commercial building is producing. So if you own a big, like a strip mall, and you've got, renters in that strip mall, tenant anchors in that strip mall, and, let's say someone wanted to buy it from you, they could go to the bank and say, hey, I want to buy this strip mall. And then they'll say, hey, well, give us all the, the gross rents and stuff like that, so we can figure out how much we think this thing is worth, and then we'll give you money for that. And the income kind of qualifies the building for you to be able to buy it. They do require, typically a little bit more money down, 10, 20% for commercial properties. But once again, if you get a little bit intricate and you say, hey, I want to try to do seller financing or a lease option, that can work too. I'll share an example. So a friend of mine in Arizona, he found this strip mall. It was listed on the market on the MLS, I think for like $4.5 million. And what he did is he knew that, this was a decent area, and about 60% of the actual units were occupied. 40% were vacant. So he's like, okay, there's some upside here because they're not renting out all of these spaces for businesses or shops. And so what he did is he went to the owner and said, hey, tell you what, I'll give you the $4.5 million. I'll put up $100,000 as earnest money. And basically I'll even make maybe half that earnest money go hard. So the minute you sign this lease option with me, we'll do a 1-year lease option. So basically I'll give you $100,000 right now, and I'll come up with the other $4.4 million later. Give me 1 year to come up with the money, and I'll buy the property from you. If not, you keep my $100,000. I'm gone. I'm walking. So what he did is he went ahead and put the building under contract, got permission from the owner to then kind of quote unquote take over. And so he started advertising some of the other store shops that were vacant, just saying, hey, come lease over here, lease over here. He moved his own company into the building, signed a 10-year lease agreement. And then what he did is he was able to take that 40% vacancy, pushed it to like 10% vacancy. Now he had like 90% occupancy in this strip mall, turned around, put it back on the market with, I'm sure, permission from the seller to say, hey, I have the right to be able to assign my contract, blah, 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 like stuff like that. Did that, sold it for $5.5 million in like just a couple months. So the guy just flipped this property, never officially owned it, but probably had all the legal verbiage and stuff to protect him to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm not tricking you by any means. Turned around and flipped it. The first owner got their $4.5 million, which they're happy with, and he walked with a $1 million spread in like 4 to 6 months off of a $100,000 investment. So think about that, $100,000, and he just made $1 million. Think about that as far as a return on money. It's pretty incredible. Now, industrial, you've got another type of investment class called industrial. So this could be like warehouses, it could be like manufacturing plants, stuff like that. Some people like to hop on loopnet.com and just kind of look at different industrial businesses across the United States. Sometimes they'll look kind of in the Midwest because they're cheaper. Well, they're cheaper for a reason. You want to just be careful. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to buy this old, Hershey chocolate plant, because it's super cheap. And I know this is a good deal compared to like California, but there's a reason for that. So do your research. With industrial, there's a lot of other rules. You want to make sure that you know what the rents are, if there are any rents. Make sure you do a really thorough inspection, as far as like utilities, condition of the property, maybe rights, OSHA rules, stuff like that. So just something to think about if you decide to get into industrial. I like to use LoopNet for commercial and industrial type of, investment type of properties. So let's talk about what makes for a good investment. So now people are like, oh man, like Howard, I just bought this property, I got a killer deal. I'm like, well, let's talk about the numbers. Like, was it a good deal? Was it not a good deal? So to me, a good deal is you want to figure out what your returns are. What kind of money are you expecting to come back? So like you've got all different types of financial leverages. So you've got like ROI, so return on your investment. So you put in $1, I got $1.04 back. Great. I made 4 cents off that dollar I put in. You've got the cap rate. So cap rate is interesting because that kind of gives you an idea of like, okay, if cap rates in this area are 5 and this deal pops up and it's a 6, that's a good deal. Great. It beats the norm in that area. C on C is another term for cash on cash return. So I love to use this one. That's one of the leverages I like to use to help me determine if my money is making money for me. So I'll give you an example. So if you bought a $100,000 condo and you put 20% down, you're financing 80, you put 20%, $20,000 down. And let's say you put a renter in there and let's say you're cash flowing $100 a month. Now you might be thinking, oh man, this is awesome. Like this is a great investment. I'm getting $100 a month. I'm generating all this cash flow. Well, hold on a second. You just put $20,000 down. You're making $100 back. Now, if you're to take that $100 and divide it by $20,000 you invested in, it's probably like 10 years before you break even on that $20,000 investment. Your cash on cash return might not be very good because you think that you're getting a good deal, but because you put so much money into the property, your returns are actually not as great as you think because your cash is not working as hard for you. Now, what is a good cash on cash return? It depends on the area. You go to like Indiana, Ohio, and you get a cash on cash return for 15%. That might be normal. You go to California, you get a cash on cash return of like 1%. That might be normal. Like it just depends on the area. Some states are better for cash flow and other states are better for appreciation. In my opinion, Utah is an appreciation state. It's not a place where you just say, I'm going to throw all this money at these properties and I'm just going to cash flow. You don't really have great cash on cash returns. The cap rates usually aren't that great in Utah, but appreciation is fantastic. I mean, you buy a property like I showed you earlier for $300,000 and the next year it goes up to 330, man, you just made $30,000 off of your net, your net worth just increased that much versus renting it, maybe cash flowing $200 a month, 200 times 12, you're $2,400 for that year. Whoop-de-doo if you made $200 cash flow and because you made $200, a month. I'd rather take the $30,000 if it goes up in value. So you got to kind of look at the different variables of like, what are you really trying to accomplish? Are you trying to go for like a long-term strategy? Hey, I want to buy this investment property and I want cash flow because that's all I want to focus on. And I don't care if the property goes up or not. Like eventually it'll be paid off and they'll pay it off and it'll be in my retirement. Or, hey, I need some money now. Like, let's buy properties, let's flip them, let's make some money. Or, hey, I'm going to buy this property because I really feel like this is an underpriced property. Do that. One really cool thing about real estate versus stocks. Now, with stocks, it's actually pretty hard. At least I haven't figured it out yet. You can't buy stocks undervalued. Now, a lot of times you can say, Howard, no, I looked at the PPE, like this is totally undervalued. And I'm like, hold on. Like, I'm talking like if you're to go buy Disney stock right now and it's selling for, I don't know, $50 a share, you can't go buy that for $40 a share. You just can't do it. You can't find it. It's just not out there. You're buying it for $50 a share. Now with real estate, it's different. So if you find properties, let's say, go back to a condo example. Let's say you find a bunch of condos and you know the market in this complex and all these condos are selling for $100,000. Let's say you can find one that's for sale for $80,000. Well, guess what? Now you just bought that property 20% under market value and you own it. Now you get all these benefits and you put the 20% down on the 80,000 or whatever. You only put $16,000 out. Like that's like mind blowing to me. So like real estate can help jumpstart you so much faster than people realize. You just have to take a little bit of risk. Make sure you do your knowledge to mitigate your risk. But any type of investment you do, you're doing some type of risk. Now going back to kind of this example, so Utah, like I said, is an appreciation state. So if you're to invest in Tooele, maybe you're going to get a cap rate of 4 or 7%, whereas Lehi might be 4%. And people say, hey, I want a 10% cash on cash return. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, good luck, or like, people are like, well, I'm like, well, I can get that for you, but like, we're going to be in Tooele and we're going to be looking at a house built in the 1900s. Now, for me, I'd rather take a lower cap rate and, lower ROI if I can get a newer house in an area that I think is going to go up versus, a property that needs a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of my time, which is valuable, to then try to squeeze some extra money out of it. It's just not worth it to me. Good tenants. That's super important. Like, I can't tell you how important it is to have good tenants. Like, make sure you do your research. Like, literally, you need to be calling the last 2 landlords. Don't just call the last one, because if you call the last one, they might say, oh yeah, Tom was a great renter. Go ahead and take him, take his application. They might just be saying that to get them out of their lives. And now you're stuck with the troubled tenant. If you call 2 of the last landlords, that'll give you an idea of, okay, this person said they're great. This person said they're horrible. Like, doesn't make sense. What's happening there? Also call their employer too, to find out if they're still working there. Cause I've had that happen. We're like, oh yeah, no, it doesn't work there. Just double check, make sure you do your research. It's always good to do that. Always ask for everything up front. Hey, I need the security deposit now. Hey, I need a copy of your driver's license. Hey, I need you to sign this lease form. Hey, I need to know who's going to be living in this property. So like get all their names in the lease agreement, because you'll never know. I mean, you can rent properties out and you're like, wait a second, who is that in my house? Like, I have no idea, or like, I mean, it could just get bad and ugly. Or like, oh yeah, I'll pay the security deposit in a month from now. Like, I'm getting this big bonus check and all this stuff. And then a month comes by and they still haven't paid you. You're like, oh, what's going on? Like, oh, well, maybe, rent, it's tight this month. Like, no. You don't want to get in a situation like that. So always screen your tenants up front, ask for everything signed up front, ask for them to get renter's insurance up front, proof of renter's insurance. Like, you want to be so buttoned up, because like, trust me, you do not want headaches down the road where it's like, this is stupid. My tenant trashed my property. I didn't get the rents I want. I had to go pay for an attorney to evict this guy. And like, I just lost $3,000 on this property because I did not get good tenants. So always look at your tenants. Lower maintenance. So you got to think about that. If you buy a property that needs a lot of work, you need to value your time, because you're going to be spending time at the house. Maybe I got to put on a new roof, new AC unit, stuff like that. Like, is it really worth it for you to cash flow an extra $100 a month to be in this, random city that maybe isn't as nice as maybe this other city? Or maybe, hey, I want to invest in townhomes because I don't want to worry about the yard, and like, I don't want to worry about replacing the roofs. Like, that could be a strategy too. Whatever you do, always make sure you have good insurance. So you want to get, like liability insurance, because you don't want a tenant tripping and breaking their leg on the front steps of your house that you own that they're renting. Because then they can say, oh, you know what? Those steps were not safe, and I'm coming after you. Well, make sure you got insurance, because you need to make sure that you're covered. So something to think about. Location. So that is the number one factor in real estate investing. I don't care who says otherwise. Location is the most important thing. I like to invest in areas that are generally newer, generally up and coming. I like to know that, hey, it's a good location. You can go on websites like citydata.com or like neighborhoodscout.com. I love those resources because it tells me like what crime rates are. It potentially tells me like sex offenders, stuff like that. That's something to think about. I had a buyer, we were looking at some duplexes up in Salt Lake, and we had this house under contract. And I'm like, hey, let's just check, and we kind of talked about it. I said, let's check the sex offender list because like the area looked a little bit sketch. And sure enough, we had a sex offender live right next door. And then like not the house next door, but the house after that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is not good. And the scary thing about it is that the owner who was selling the house to us was Airbnb in that property for years. And I'm pretty sure that they had like kids come to that property with their parents and stuff like that. Like just a little, Airbnb to stay at this place when they had no idea that they had sex offenders on both sides of the property. Like do your research. Like there's a reason you got to do your research, and location is one of those. You can't move those sex offenders once you bought the house. Like you got to double check your stuff. So think about that. You don't want to be, generally you don't want to buy properties, backing up to like railroads or like, warehouses or big commercial or like, power lines, stuff like that. So think about that because people do take that into consideration. Closing remarks. So I just want to thank you guys for hopping on this webinar with me. I hope that this was informational for you. I hope you're able to take a lot of notes. I'm going to save this video and I'm going to upload this to a closed Facebook group of mine, which you're all more than welcome to join. It's Utah Valley Real Estate Investing or Investments. Find it and then just fill out the stuff, and I can accept you in there, and you'll find videos like this on there. But don't be afraid to invest in real estate. If you have any questions, talk to your friends, talk to family that have invested in real estate. Feel free to call me if you want. Do YouTube research. I just think that one of the best advice that I've been given is that you need to buy real estate and wait. Don't wait to buy real estate, because I remember every year since 2011 when I got started here in Utah, every year I'd find somebody that says, you know what, I want the market to crash. I'm waiting for the market to go down. Or I'm going to save up 20%. I only got 10% right now. Like I know I can buy a property right now, but I'm going to save up an extra 10% and buy next year. Well, guess what? You saved up that 10%. That property just went up $30,000. Like you saved up an extra 15 grand to buy the house. You just lost 15 grand because that property just went up $30,000. So that's just kind of something to think about. But anyways, thanks for joining. Just kind of a little bit of my credentials. So I am the principal broker owner of Utah Valley Realty. I've been doing real estate for about 10 years now. I'm also a licensed realtor in Arizona with HomeSmart. And I have a bachelor's degree from BYU under business management. But anyways, that is it. Let's go ahead now. We're going to do some quick Q&A, and we'll try to get things wrapped up in the next couple minutes. Okay, so a good question is, how do I buy a property with no money down? So couple strategies. If you're going to buy this as an owner-occupied property, so meaning that you are going to live in it, and let's say you're a first-time home buyer, you don't even have to be a first-time home buyer. You could potentially qualify for some loan programs like a USDA rural loan, which is typically a no money down loan. There are restrictions. You do have to live in like certain areas where, maybe it's a little bit more rural. That's why they call it the rural loan, no money down. Another one is, especially in Utah, they've got a Utah housing loan, which is also a no money down loan. You can also do like seller financing opportunities where you can just say, hey, you know what? Like, I want to buy this property from you. I'm not going to put any money down, but what I will do is I'm going to bump up the monthly payment. So instead of me paying, $1,500, which is the going rate, I'll pay you $2,000 every month until I can qualify to go buy the house from you. So that could be an opportunity for you to be able to buy a house with no money down. So you can get you can figure it out. It's pretty cool. So any other questions? All right. So here's a question. So how much more are interest rates if you're financing, you're not going to live in it for a year? So good question. So I am a loan officer. The thing that I can't really share rates just because I can get in trouble unless I quote the interest rate and the terms of it. Or quote the APR as well with that. But what I do know is that if you do buy a house as a primary residence, let's say your rate is this. When you go buy a property as an investment property, your rate's going to be this. So one of the strategies that I like to do, especially if you're a younger family or if you're willing to move a lot, is I would go buy buy an investment or buy an owner-occupied property right now. I'd put 5% down, or whatever money you've got down, no money down. FHA 3.5% down or conventional 5% down. I would buy that. I'd get the better interest rate, less money down. I would live there for 1 year. And then after that year, I'd go buy another primary residence, do the same thing I just did here, turn this into a rental. And then they're covering your mortgage for you. You're getting all the benefits in that. And then you can just kind of ladder effect. And you can do that 4 times. So if you do that 4 times, you're putting 5%, 5%, 5%, 5% down. So 20% total, which now you own 4 properties at the lower interest rate versus buying 1 rental property at 20% down, getting the higher interest rate. So I'm kind of a bigger fan of leverage. I think that you should obviously carry some cash on hand. A lot of banks do require that if you do buy rental properties, they are looking for 6 months in reserves of monthly payments. So if you know that, hey, I'm going to buy this property, you need to make sure that you've got ample reserve funds for that, or the bank will say, hey, you know what? You don't have enough reserves for that. So yeah, great question. So here's a good question. So it says, do you feel like houses are being inflated since people can qualify for more due to lower interest rates? Yes, I do. I totally hands down do. I feel that home prices, I think, are overinflated. I think they're really crazy expensive right now. However, you kind of have to think about the whole cycle of things. Like U.S. debt is constantly going up. At some point, somebody's going to have to pay for it, or we're just going to do more and more debt, which could cause hyperinflation, which means prices will go up even more, which is another kind of mind-blowing thing to think about. But going back to my example, so if someone posted this earlier on Facebook, a $400,000 house at today's interest rates was the same monthly payment as a $350,000 house at a higher interest rate. And this was like a real life situation, like only like a year ago. So it just kind of shows that, hey, yes, home prices are inflated, but what the banks are concerned about is monthly payments, which is unfortunate because obviously, like, I kind of have a little bit of Dave Ramsey where it's like, it'd be nice to be able to pay cash and pay it down faster. But yeah, I think a lot of things are inflated as well. And I think that the future of it is, you look at 30 years ago, there weren't 30-year loans. They were 15-year loans, maybe 20-year loans. And the banks are like, people can't qualify. Home prices are going up. Like, we'll create a 30-year loan. Brilliant idea. I think that the future could be a 40-year loan. I have no idea. So just kind of something to think about. Another person asked, would you recommend buying a fourplex over a home? It depends. So a guy I follow on YouTube, Meet Kevin, so he invests in single family homes in California. And he says, the reason I do that is because there are so many people focusing on multi-units that the prices have gone up so high that he's like, it doesn't even financially make sense to me to invest in. I'd rather invest in a single family house. So personally, if you're looking at house hack, I would look at all the numbers. I think fourplexes could be a great idea. It just kind of depends on the person too. If you're someone that likes to maybe be a little handy, guess what? Now you got 3 units. You're going to probably be checking the toilet, stuff like that, unless you hire a handyman. You have more toilets to worry about, versus like one house and stuff like that. But it depends on the numbers. I think in fourplex over a single family house, it kind of depends. So one thing too to bring up. So with multi-unit properties, this is a really cool strategy, by the way. So if you buy a single family house, there's only so much you can do to increase the value of that house. What I mean by that is, let's say you buy a house, you put in granite countertops, new flooring, new cabinets, and all the neighbors' homes are kind of similar, and their houses are selling for $350. You put that in, maybe your house is worth $360, but the appraiser, when they come and value the property, they're going to say, wait a second, this house isn't worth $400 because all these comps are showing me it's worth $350. So you can only do so much to really increase the value of the of that single family house. With multi-units, it's different. So the appraiser values it based on the cash flow and how much money it's generating. So if you buy a fourplex, and let's say each unit is renting for $800 a month, and you go in and spend $20,000, and now you remodel those units, and now those units, now you can command $1,000 a month. Well, now you just increase the overall revenue of that fourplex by by 200 times 4, $800. Now, if you jumped it by $800 a month, that's going to change your cap rate, and that's going to change the cash flow of the property. And crazy enough, that's going to change the value of the property because appraisers value multi-units based on like cap rates and what the going cap rate is in the area. So if you can really squeeze extra rents out, you just increase that fourplex from, let's say, $500,000, increase to $800 a month to $600,000 with only $20,000. That is a great strategy to be able to buy multi-units. So, yep. So that was the question. Any other questions? We'll just take maybe one more to kind of wrap up. These are great questions, by the way. All right. I will take this question real quick, and then we'll just kind of finish up. So this question, so it says, can you explain the BRRRR strategy? So that is something you'll find on Bigger Pockets. It's a podcast that I'd highly recommend if you're looking to get into real estate investing to start following and listening to. Basically, the BRRRR strategy is a little bit harder to do, I'd say, in like higher appreciation states like California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, stuff like that. But you're basically buying a property under market. You're rehabbing it. So you're putting a little bit of money in it to get it, into a good status. Then you're refinancing it. So you buy property 70% under value. You put maybe 10% of money into the house to get it up. So the house is worth this. You put just a little bit of money to get the value up to that because maybe the house was totally gross and you made it not gross again. So now you've got a 20% margin. You can go to the bank and refinance it, and they'll basically give you your money back off the investment and say, hey, we'll refinance at the higher amount because you made it worth that much more. They'll then give you your money back, and then you can rent it for the higher amount, and then you can repeat the process. So it's kind of a really cool strategy. I see a lot of it happening kind of in the Midwest where you can have a lot more flexibility in buying properties a lot lower and doing that. The other thing too, you got to think about too, if you do a cash out refinance, is a lot of banks want money to season for 6 months to a year. So just because you remodel the property, you increased its value, you've got a renter in there, you can't oftentimes refinance and pull the cash out right away. There is a seasoning period for that. So good question. Well, that's it. Hope this was beneficial for you guys. Let me know if you have any other questions. I'm going to be doing these once a month, and hopefully I can kind of stir some thoughts for you guys to help get you going with real estate investing.